Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week's first question comes from Kevin Logan, who says, what can be done by the American left to reconnect with the white working class Rust Belt voter who voted en masse for Trump, but without just pandering to racial prejudices? Can this even be done at this point? I feel compelled to answer your question by quoting Reverend Lovejoy from The Simpsons and saying, long answer, yes with an and, short answer, no with a but. Because I do think it's possible. I do think that the Democratic Party can reach out to those disaffected white Rust Belt working class voters that went predominantly for Trump in this last election. And I think one of the things they need to do is figure out how to simplify their party's message to the extent that Trump and the Republicans simplified their message this time around, and that really that the Republicans have simplified their party's message to the working class for the last several election cycles. The Republican Party has been pretty good at reaching the white working class voters with a very simple, very direct, very uncomplicated message. And often, and especially this time around, that message is overflowing with racism and xenophobia and all kinds of fear-mongering, but it's a very simple message. The Democratic Party, for lots of different reasons, is and ought to be thought of as the party of the working class. They just need to figure out a way to reach working class people. They need to figure out how to sort of just condense the message of their party and the benefits of their party. Our party, I should say, because I am a registered Democrat now. The message of our party to working class people should be simple and direct and something that is easily understood and easily repeated. And we didn't have that this time, and I think we need that for next time. Ahoy Yerno! For decades, the Republicans have been dismantling the American democracy, gutting the VRA, Citizens United, gerrymandering, reducing poll times, locations, voter ID laws, and many more that restrict access to the ballot. Trump will probably stack the Supreme Court with justices opposed to most rights and liberties. All of this happened in plain sight. Everyone knows about it, and now the American Republic is a shadow of what it once was, especially on the local and state level. Here's the question. Why did Democrats let this happen? Why didn't anyone fight? There's been a lot of talk, but not much action, and that surprises me. Why are Americans so complacent about the dismantling of democracy itself? A lot of it probably has to do with the fact that fighting is hard. Activism is hard. Even something like being an active participant in the political process apart from voting in elections is hard for some people. It takes effort. It takes effort to call your congressperson or your senator. It takes effort to write letters and to write emails and to make phone calls and to round people up and to organize and to raise awareness and to do all the things that we need to be doing, especially now more than ever. That stuff is just hard. You know, it takes time out of your day that you could be spending doing something else. And a lot of people, especially if we're talking about people who are relatively comfortable or at least not feeling imminently threatened by something that the opposition party is proposing, a lot of people just don't feel motivated to do it. I also think that for generations now, Americans have been socialized and conditioned to be trusting of institutions. We are essentially trusting of our institutions, including our political process. As much as we whine and complain about it, we are, many of us, most of us, fundamentally trusting of those institutions. So we don't really feel like those sorts of radical reforms are necessary because most of us perceive things as being fine the way they are. And with that perception in place, it's very difficult to mobilize people into action, even when, as is the case now as a result of the most recent election, that democracy is under serious threat. Patrick Dodds, Steve, what do you expect the left progressive wing of the country to do in the next 2 to 4 years? Will we unite and fight back? Will we become a new counterculture like in the 60s? Can we succeed against the new regime? What's your forecast for us? You shouldn't ask me what my forecast is because I've been wrong every step of the way this year. I was one of those people who never expected Trump to even get out of the primaries, let alone get the nomination, let alone win. I mean, don't ask for my forecast because I have proven myself to be an unreliable prognosticator when it comes to this stuff. What I like the left to do, what do I think we should do? I think that we should be engaging in grassroots activism. We should be finding and promoting and supporting and ultimately voting for, with the aim of electing the most progressive candidates we can find at the local and state level, first and foremost, and then also at the federal level in 2 years when our next congressional and senatorial elections are up. We should be voting for the most progressive candidates on the ballot every time we go to the polling place. I think that is the number one most important thing we have to do. We need to start rebuilding and mobilizing a progressive voting bloc. Plibler. Hey, Steve, do you think these last few weeks of being assorted creationist crazies back into the fold will finally end the bizarre shotgun marriage between atheism and anti-liberalist paranoia, at least for the time being? I suspect that during a liberal presidency, everything began going well, and creationist stupidity was being held at arm's length from power, which lulled YouTube and other communities into a false sense of security. It was during this time that a lot of atheist thought leaders transitioned away from talking atheism into shrieking about SJW paranoia and PC police vitriol for clicks, revealing themselves not to be interested in science or reason, but instead in mindless contrarianism for pay. Do you think a new generation of thinkers who care about the truth can emerge from this? Just looking for silver linings. Yes, I think that a new wave of secular, atheist, skeptical thinkers can emerge from this, can supplant the toxic atheists that have dominated the community on YouTube and on the internet in general for many years now. I think that definitely can happen. Again, I caution you to not put too much confidence in me as a prognosticator, because I have shown by my track record, at least in terms of politics, that I'm not so great at that. But can it happen? Yes. And there are encouraging signs that such a thing could happen, could begin to happen in a real way in the next few years. For instance, people like H. Bomber Guy, who is continuing to gather momentum with his YouTube channel. And obviously his audience and his subscriber base isn't even close to some of the toxic atheists on the other side. But he's moving in that direction, and he's known by a lot of people, and his work is getting a lot of attention and a lot of respect from people within the community. I think that is very important. I think the continued success and saturation, sort of cultural presence within atheist circles of people like Aaron Ra and Lalandra and Seth Andrews and Matt Dillahunty and the whole gang at the Atheist Experience, and people from the sort of in real life section of the secular atheist movement, like Greta Christina, like Alex Jules, like Sincere Carabo, people like that who can continue to sort of make their presence felt here and there in the online communities and continue to lead by example in the in real life skeptic communities at conventions and meetings, that sort of thing. I think all of that will really, really help and show us that it is possible. We're not necessarily stuck with the, asshole, proud, misogynist, racist, rape apologist, self-styled, self-proclaimed skeptics that we have that are currently at the forefront of the atheist community on YouTube. It is that way now. It has been that way for some time, but it need not be that way forever. The Nightmare Rider. Hi there, Steve. Another Trump-related question, I'm afraid. I am feeling quite torn on people who wish to vacate America now that Trump is in power. More so the privileged people, as I hold no ill will to minorities who feel they have to flee somewhere that hates their existence. Essentially, is it fair to chastise privileged people who want to leave America after the election of Trump for abandoning what they see as a sinking ship? Oh, I would say yes. I would say it's entirely fair to chastise those people. As you say, if you are a marginalized person, if you are a person who feels genuinely threatened by a Trump administration or by the 60-some million people who voted for a Trump administration in this country, I have no quarrel with you wanting to get the hell out of here at all. I mean, this country, a very large segment of this country has just communicated through the ballot box that it doesn't care about you, or that in some cases it positively wants to harm you or views you as a threat or as something negative. And I don't blame you at all for saying, you know what, fuck this place, I'm getting the hell out of here, if indeed you are able to do that. But yeah, people who could stay and fight and make things easier on the rest of us, and enable other people to fight and to resist the administration and to resist the tide of re-energized, reinvigorated white supremacy and misogyny that is coming as a result of the election. People who could stay and help but have chosen for their own convenience or their own vanity or whatever that they want to leave. Yeah, fuck those people. I absolutely think it's fair to chastise those people. If you want to leave because you feel threatened or because you feel like you have to leave, then more power to you. If you choose to leave because, I just don't like it here anymore, when you have the power and the privilege to stay and to help other people fight, then yeah, I really don't have too much good to say to you. You have a right to leave, but it would be a much better look for you, and you would be a much greater help to your country and the world in general if you were to stay and help other people who need your help fight the good fight. Justin Parallax, here's a good question. What the heck do you think actually happened to the skeptic community on YouTube? I'm an atheist myself, and even I find them to be, as you've described them in the past, toxic, with several big names actively moving against rationalism and secular humanist ideals to instead back Trump, rallying against feminists or sliding to the alt-right. It made me feel deeply repulsed. Could their attitudes toward feminism be based on a lack of school education on social sciences? Or is it just an example of that they started out by bullying an easy target and had no real interest in secular knowledge in the first place? I think it's a combination of all of those, to be honest, Justin. I think that a lot of it is that when the atheist skeptical community started on YouTube, it was very much oriented in an attack the other mode. It was very much an us versus creationists sort of thing, or us versus Christians, or us versus evangelicals, whatever the other was. It was us versus them. And when those groups sort of stopped being so active, or the more prominent channels on that side either shut down or stopped producing new content or just stopped engaging with atheists, the people who had built their channels on doing that sort of thing turned to other targets, and the targets they turned to were feminists, so-called social justice warriors, and various other people who advocated for progressive political stuff and human rights and that sort of thing. Stuff that falls under the umbrella, generally speaking, of humanism, secular humanism. And yeah, I think a lot of it is that they're oriented to be bullies, to be attack dogs. That's the only thing they know how to do, and that's just what they kept right on doing. And I also think that your point about education is probably in the ballpark too. A lot of people seem to have this idea that somehow social science is not legitimate science, that social science is different, or that the studies of social science or the conclusions of social scientists are not valid or don't deserve to be taken seriously or can just be dismissed if they make us uncomfortable. So yeah, I think part of that is a problem as well, absolutely. Yannick Muller, hi Steve. Since I first watched Buster Keaton's The General, I always found it odd that he chose to portray the protagonist as part of the Southern Army and the Northerners as the invading bad guys. Why do you think he did that? Of course, I associate the Confederate States with racism and slavery and don't think of courageous heroes that rescue their locomotives from evil Yankees. Did Keaton take a political side with this, or is there another reason for it, political or story-wise, I haven't considered yet? I'd like to hear your thoughts. I am not all that familiar with Keaton's personal beliefs or personal thoughts about the Confederacy, or indeed about racism in general. I think it's possible that he chose to make the general the way he did and to tell that story the way he did because he felt that telling it from the Confederate side was the best choice for his story, would enable him to make the most exciting, most interesting, most artful, funniest movie. It's also possible, and in fact even likely, based on the world in which Keaton lived, that he was just comfortable with racism and with casual racism, or what would have been considered maybe casual racism back in his day that we would now take a much harsher view of. This was a period in entertainment where things like white performers performing in blackface was still relatively commonplace. And Keaton himself performed in blackface in his film College, which is a splendid film, except for that one scene where he performs in blackface, which today seems just, it's difficult to ignore. It's like, oh, God damn it, Buster, what are you doing? So I think it was probably a combination of all of those factors. It was a combination of he thought it was the best way to tell that story. He thought that there was nothing wrong with telling it from the Confederate side. He wasn't bothered by the racism, by the pro-slavery elements of the Confederacy during the Civil War. He himself was probably comfortable with what we would now definitely consider racist humor or racist depictions of black folks, given the fact that he performed in blackface himself. So I think it was probably a combination of all of those things. And it's a nice, somewhat uncomfortable reminder that this brilliant genius Buster Keaton lived in a time where, by today's standards, things were incredibly overtly racist in this country, and he himself was not immune to that, was not significantly better than the zeitgeist of his era required him to be, which is disappointing, for those of us who admire him and admire his work, but I suppose is nothing else than what we would expect. Speaking of what we would expect, it's around this time of the video, especially after you hear that noise, that you would expect me to wrap up this section of the video and move on to the next section, which is a little something I like to call the lightning round. Inertia. Steve, have you noticed how our society seems to equate gay men with femininity, but trans women with masculinity? Isn't it about time we switch the script on that? Oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me either. Gay men are not considered masculine, but trans women are. That makes no sense at all. Brian Gibson, are you expecting, well, by the time you post your next video in this series, I guess it will be Have You Had, any awkward family Thanksgiving conversations over the election? Well, I am recording this video actually Wednesday night, and then of course it will go up on Friday. So I am not expecting any uncomfortable conversations at Thanksgiving because my wife and I are skipping all of our family Thanksgivings and we're just doing our own thing this year, which is, it's just such a wonderful thing. That wasn't always the plan, but it worked out that way and I am really happy and kind of sort of super relieved. It's going to be great. By the time you see this, it will have been great. David Edwards, I'm having a hard time with all the choices. Too many films to see, too many videos to watch, too many books to read or listen to, too many graphic novels to read, and too many software tutorials to watch. How do we not constantly live in regret because so much great stuff is passing us by? Well, I deal with it the same way I deal with pretty much everything, which is I just don't think about it. I just think about something else. I don't think about all the great films I could be watching or probably should be watching or the great books I should be reading. I just say, fuck it, I'm going to watch The Room for the 100th time. And I tell myself that that's enough. American Anarchist. Hey, Steve. After electoral analysis, do you think that suppression of voting in the urban areas in red states and purple states and shutting down polls in these areas may have contributed to a Trump victory? I think may have, yes. I mean, I haven't seen enough evidence to say that I'm definitely sure beyond a reasonable doubt that that was what flipped the election. But yeah, the election was close enough in certain states and Clinton's lead in the popular vote is now big enough. It's nearly 2 million votes that, yeah, absolutely, I'm comfortable saying that it may have played a very significant role in flipping the election to Trump. Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to see that investigated further, preferably before the Electoral College votes. Ink Switch. Steve, in regard to the discussion about the U.S. electoral system, would a better option not be to abolish the Electoral College and the first-past-the-post system and just replace it with one of proportional representation? Yeah, I mean, I don't think that would be the end of the world. Lots of other countries have a proportional representation system, have a parliamentary system for their legislature, for their government. I think that would be fine. I don't think it's ever going to happen because I think it would require such a significant overhaul of our Constitution, and Americans deify our Constitution to such an extent that such a radical change would be unthinkable to most of us. I also think, I mean, even if we don't replace the current system with proportional representation and we keep it as it is, which is basically just a series of many different winner-take-all elections, if we replaced first-past-the-post with instant runoff voting, I think that would be a big improvement. Kaboom Platyuk 2. Kaboom Splat Yuck. I always fuck up this name. I apologize. Kaboom Splat Yuck 2. So if you had enough money to flee the United States, which country would you move to and why? Oh, I'd go up there to Canada. I know people in Canada. I know some nice people in Canada. I also know of some real pricks in Canada, but most of the people I know of who live in Canada are wonderful people. And as I said in a Stephen Suffy video last week, I hear Vancouver is lovely. Corey Donaldson, would you consider Star Trek the original series and Star Trek the Next Generation to be social justice warrior TV shows? And by the way, Corey, I apologize. I know you submitted this question for consideration for the regular part of the video, not as a lightning round question, but I just thought it worked pretty good as a lightning round question, so I hope you don't mind me answering it that way. Yes. To answer your question, yes, I think that both Star Trek the original series and Next Generation are two of the biggest so-called SJW TV shows ever, and it really makes me kind of laugh when people complain about, oh, the SJWs are ruining Star Trek, you know, when they hear like casting rumors for the new show Discovery, or even back when I was like a teenager and they were like, oh, there's going to be a woman on Voyager, the Voyager captain's going to be a woman, and the Vulcan's going to be a black guy, it's so politically correct. Like, what show have you been watching for the last couple of decades? It's been the most self-consciously liberal, progressive, politically correct show ever. You never complained before, so you shut the fuck up. That's my answer. Jeremy Miller, what is the best way to respond to Trump supporters who have built the media up as a mass brainwasher of everyone who doesn't agree with him? I like the mute button, the block button, and I really like voting for the most progressive candidate on the ballot every time there's an election. Fadi Haddad, what's your stand on deism? I actually used to call myself a deist for many years before I sort of came to terms with the fact that I was an atheist. I called myself a deist rather than calling myself a Christian, which is what I had been. I think deism is definitely a more respectable position than like a specific organized religious belief, because deism can be a very simple belief. You can just believe that a God exists, that a deity exists, and that can be it. And I think that's much easier to justify and much easier to reconcile with reality and what we know about reality from scientific investigation than most religious beliefs. So I mean, I'm not a deist myself. I don't believe that gods exist, but I think deism is much easier to swallow than like more specific, in-depth, organized religions. Sabrina Lozides Meredith. So, Steve, what will you be eating for Thanksgiving since you no longer eat meat? Well, we're going to have a tofurkey with some stuffing and some lovely mushroom gravy, and we're going to have sweet potatoes in syrup. They're going to be delicious. And then, of course, some pumpkin pie with whipped cream, because I am a vegetarian, not a vegan, so I can have the whipped cream and the other assorted animal products. That's what we're going to have. It's going to be delicious. And again, I'm taping this on Wednesday night, so I'm going to be eating all of this delicious food tomorrow, so I can just imagine how good it tastes. Radical Bacon, should I get the T-Rex pop-up Christmas card or the Shark pop-up Christmas card? Okay, I'm sure that a lot of people, these Shark Week people, these Discovery Channel people, are going to say you should totally go for the Shark pop-up Christmas card. I want to tell you, completely straight, those people are not your friends. Go with the T-Rex. always go with the T-Rex. If it's a choice between a T-Rex and any extant mammal on the earth today, always go with a T-Rex. If you go T-Rex versus other dinosaurs, then you can get into some arguments. Then it's eye of the beholder, right? But T-Rex versus any current living animal, T-Rex. Matt Helmers, hey Steve, in a climate of growing anti-Semitism, how great was it to see a Jewish hero, Goldberg, completely destroy a supposedly unstoppable Aryan monster, Lesnar? It goes to show that even though bullies might seem scary and powerful, a couple of spears and a jackhammer will bring them down just like anybody else. Yeah, I agree with you. When you look at it in those terms, it is really splendid. I'm pretty sure that's not what the intention was when they booked that result for that match, but if you read it that way, it's pretty awesome that the jacked up Jewish guy just completely destroyed the Aryan Superman Brock Lesnar. I think that's a wonderful way to look at it, and yeah, viewed in that context, it's super awesome. That was the last question, everybody. That's the end of the lightning round. I'm almost done with the entire video, actually. But before I go, I want to give a shout out to an awesome YouTube channel. And this time, actually, not only a YouTube channel, but also a wonderful podcast. The shout out this week goes to the gang over at Promoting Secular Feminism. This is a podcast, and they just started a YouTube channel a couple of months ago that they're just sort of starting to get into gear. It is a podcast hosted by Miss B. Haven, get it, and Demanda Wright, also featuring God, their producer, and the Penis Gallery, which would be Mr. Haven and Mr. Wright. And it's a podcast that you can probably tell by the title, it's a podcast that promotes secular feminism. And you can listen to all of the episodes of the podcast at their website, which is promotingsecularfeminism.com. And you can also check out their YouTube channel, which you can also reach from that website, promotingsecularfeminism.com. About 2 weeks ago, they put up a really awesome, just short, like 5-minute video called The F Word, that is an introduction to the concept of feminism that was just wonderful. I can't recommend it highly enough. I can't recommend the podcast or the YouTube channel or the website, Promoting Secular Feminism, highly enough. Go check it out if you've never heard of it. I really think you're going to enjoy it because I think it's really great. I've really enjoyed listening to it and catching up on it the last couple of weeks. It's comes with my highest recommendation. Speaking of quality podcasts, I want to remind you, as I always do at this time every week, that you should be listening to the Lemme Listen podcasts. These are the podcasts that are the creations of the brilliant Jason Harding, aka Jason with a D from Opinionville. There's a whole bunch of awesome Lemme Listen podcasts that you can check out, like Lemme Finish, which is co-hosted by Jason and Finite Atticus, like American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, the hilarious improv comedy podcast, like Filmtastic Voyage, hosted by Mike and Alex, like Cinetific, the podcast that examines the science of popular films that is co-hosted by Professor Jason and Professor Aaron, and last but certainly not least, because it's the one that I'm in, Late Seating, the movie review podcast co-hosted by Jason and yours truly, where we look at a classic film, we give it a fresh review, we make fun of it as we summarize it, and we decide for ourselves and for your entertainment whether or not the film in question lives up to its reputation, whether that reputation is that it's a great film or a terrible film. And in our most recent episode that will go online today, the same day that this video is published, you can hear us review the classic Martin Scorsese film, the boxing biopic extraordinaire par excellence, starring Robert De Niro, Raging Bull. That's the subject of our new episode of Late Seating. You can listen to that episode and all of the past episodes of Late Seating and all of the episodes of all of the excellent Lemme Listen podcasts by going to lemmelistenpodcast.com. And boy, I wish you would. Gosh, Mr. and Mrs. and non-binary folks and just everybody, you won't be sorry if you listen to the Lemme Listen podcast. That's it for me, everybody. I am out of here. I want to remind you, as always, to please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. Ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until next time, take care, everybody. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/SteveShives to become a patron of this channel for as little as $1 a month. Really helps me out. Thanks so much, as always, for watching, and I'll see you next time.